Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to the Tech23 Impact Circles. And for those who are new to the circles, welcome. Thank you all for joining today's conversation, which is sure to be a good one, exploring why mentors matter for founders on the frontier. As is custom, I would first like to acknowledge both the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and the Bunwurrung and Woiwurrung Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land where the Slatterys team meets, works, and creates. We pay our respects to the elders, both past, present, and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Now, today's conversation is going to be led by Cass Mao, and she'll be joined by Dror Ben-Naim, Dr. Craig Davis, Sheryl Frame, Ben Reid, and David Spence. Very exciting. I'd first like to just make a special shout out to the Tech23 sponsors, Transport for New South Wales, Main Sequence Sparrow Innovation Fund, Oz Industry Entrepreneurs Program delivered in partnership with i4 Connect, Addison's, ASX, ANSTO, Curtin University, Cicada Innovations, and Evoke AG for making Tech23 happen. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, Adina, and hello, everyone, wherever you are zooming in from around the country. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you, and especially to our amazing contributors today who are helping to make these Tech23 Impact Circles happen. Thank you to all of those zooming in around the country. Please say hello and introduce yourselves in the chat, where you're also welcome to ask your questions and chat to people. Perhaps you might want to even just write a little bit about what mentorship means to you currently, or any questions that you have that you've come to this circle with. The link to the Slatterys Charter will be found in the chat too right now. This is a guide to the behaviour we welcome at all of our events. There are lots more Tech23 circles planned for 21, and there's many more that we held last year that you might want to visit and stretch your minds around lots of different topics. Please note that today's circle will be recorded. Just confirming that we're eavesdropping on this wonderful conversation, and then we'll move to Q&A, and afterwards you are welcome to stay on the line and connect. But for now, I am honoured and grateful to welcome Cass to kick things off. Hello, Cass.
Hello. Thanks everyone for joining. We're just going to get straight into it. Rather than do the kind of very slow introduction of each person's very impressive bio, I thought that I would leave it to the audience to have read up on all the people that are joining us today. And instead, I wanted to get each of the speakers to share a story about a mentor in their career or in their life who has kind of left an impact on them, and maybe a reflection on the process or the person, or anything about the relationship that they thought would be helpful to start off the conversation. So I might start with Cheryl.
Okay, lovely to be here, and thanks for the opportunity, Rachel and your team. I don't have a mentor story to share with you per se, but I'm going to share with you a failed business story and where a mentor could have provided absolute invaluable advice to me. Some years ago, I got involved in a startup business that had the rights to vend from a machine product that is restricted. And we were going to build a pharmaceutical vending machine that had the ability to do for banking what pharmacy what ATMs had done for banking. It was a great challenge. We wanted it to feel like an ATM so people would feel comfortable going up, pressing a button, connecting with the duty pharmacist, and being able to get their prescription dispensed right then and there. Very convenient, especially in remote areas where there aren't pharmacists in every town. The technology was a challenge, everything was great, and I was new to the pharmacy industry, so I surrounded myself with a board of advisors. Not a mentor as such, but I thought all these advisors were going to have key roles, and they were going to help me navigate through the laws of pharmacies, the do's and don'ts, and get this right. Well, we did. As far as dispensing was concerned, we built a very successful machine, and we failed to commercialize on a technicality. And the technicality was that in each state in Australia, there's a law that governs how many pharmacies a pharmacist can own. And nobody, including everybody in Canberra that I lobbied with for 2 years, could tell me whether this machine was to be classified as one of the pharmacies or whether it was simply a cupboard because it was dormant. And we couldn't get permission to commercialize a very successful product because of illegality. So I keep asking myself the question, what I did wrong, how a mentor might have been able to help me in those circumstances, and what is different between a mentor and a board of advisors. So I'm going to throw that out to the group.
I love that. I think something that's coming up for me a lot recently is the idea that, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And it's a bit hard sometimes to look for a mentor when you don't know the kind of mentoring that you're looking for. But I love that story of, yeah, kind of a huge glaring kind of gap. Thanks, Cheryl. I'll go along to Ben.
Thanks, Cass. I do actually have a pretty standout moment for myself. I was a young whippersnapper engineer, and I was very early on in my career, and I got thrown into some very big projects early on, and had a little bit of imposter syndrome about it. And I still felt confident in my talent, but was kind of wondering whether I fitted in. I was finding myself being quite reserved at times, and I have someone. Was I going to name them? Yeah, I'll name them. So I have someone, Clayton Cook, who I went to him and I asked him for feedback. And one thing I did try to do very early on was ask for feedback about how I could improve. And I remember talking to Clayton and kind of going, what's your perception of how I'm handling things in this project? And he turned around to me and basically said, Benno, you need to back yourself more. You've got the talent, you've got the skills. I believe in you, so you should believe in yourself. And it stands out for me so strongly as like just a moment where someone's backing you. And I think it is a key part of mentorship, is actually that ability to back someone else, believe in them. I know often as a startup founder and speaking to founders, we often feel like we're maybe an imposter in a category, or we're going into an area where we don't have the skills or expertise. So yeah, having someone like that believe in you 100% can make a big difference. So that stands out for me.
Love that story. Definitely relates to my hero moment of my mentor, just saying like, you're going to be great and I back you to do whatever you need to do. And like, let's just go on the journey and stop kind of dicking around not doing it. Thanks, Ben. Let's go to Craig. Oh, you're on mute. Yes.
Amateur mistake. Amateur mistake, and I do this all the time. Sorry. Hi, everyone. My name's Craig Davis. I work in the Canberra Innovation Network. Super quick intro. First, my mentor story, I'd like to start with a non-mentor story, which is as we build up a startup business over 10 years, I didn't have any mentors, and I didn't engage in that process, and I was quite isolated, and that led to some pretty dark moments, challenging times, and obviously made lots of mistakes. We got through it and went pretty well and all of that sort of stuff. But honestly, I see that as a real missed opportunity. Anyway, my mentor story is after exiting that startup, I got a lot of mentoring from someone who's, I think, quite well known to the Tech23 community, Nick McNaughton. But the thing I want to emphasize about that is it wasn't like a mentor relationship. I never said to Nick, can you give me some help? Nick never said, I want to give you some advice. We just did things together, and he exposed to me. He was open about his processes and what he was up to, and just was was made visible some of the processes he was doing, and we talked about things and helped each other actually on projects and worked together on projects. And I think there was a role model element to that, and I want to introduce the concept of a role model into this mentor conversation, because you see people who you admire, and you admire certain things about the way they work or what they do. And I think that's, and learning from that is a part of that whole rich variety of things which come under mentoring. So that's the bit I wanted to introduce.
Yeah, awesome. I wrote down to come back to, I'm super curious why you didn't have mentors on that 10-year journey. And I also think kind of the point around, it's hard to learn from people except on specifics, right? Like people kind of giving general advice is very different to here is how you actually write this document, and here's actually how you put together that email. So both great points for us to come back to.
Brilliant.
Right? Dror.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dror Ben-Naim. I'm founder and CEO of Sparrow. The business went through a successful exit just before the pandemic, like literally hours before the whole thing started.
Did it cause the pandemic?
Was that?
Did you cause the pandemic? Discuss.
So my mentors, there were a few over the years and different times as the business grew. So one story is, so one of them was become my co-founder. He was an older friend of my brother who started his own business in Israel. And this is where I'm from. And I came to Australia to study and ultimately live. And literally we flew him over from Israel with 6 kids and a wife to join us. So that he helped me, was my mentor for the beginning, but then also was my colleague. A few years later, Daniel Petrie, known Sydney-based investors, he kind of was, I guess, my mentor. And then later, it was someone who in America, when I was in America, raising money there, I had an American guy, older senior, and he was joining as a kind of quasi-mentor advisor, a chairperson role. And so I think I spanned the bandwidth of different types of kind of people. And for me, a mentor is someone who's unequivocally on the founder's side. And I really needed it in my journey. And one useful example is this, closing Series C in the US, and it was a very complicated, lots of details around the deal. But we had a big nonprofit from Iowa, and investors from London, the old investors from Australia. I'm in San Francisco. It was a bit of some investors have beef with other investors. It was a political challenge, and I learned a lot. And I remember being hours on the phone with different types of people, just brainstorming the strategy of what is going on, and someone with a lot of experience in that space who's been through these things could really help me understand with him what's in it for me of different type of stakeholders, and ultimately led to a successful landing of the deal, which was transformative and crucial. So that was really a part of it was psychology, just talking to me, helping me navigate it, because you're really by yourself if you're the CEO of raising, the founder CEO. Also, you the ordinary shareholder, so you're at the bottom of the preference stack. So it's complicated things. It really helps someone who has experience, who's done that before, and kind of be a sounding board and mentor during those times. So for me, it was very important.
Thanks, Dror. Yeah, I really like the kind of people being super specialized, like people's experiences are quite specific, and the way that they can help seems generally to be quite specific to what they've been through. And so, yeah, we definitely talked on a previous call around capital raising and the role of mentors in that versus kind of supporting the founders more generally, but we'll definitely come back to that. Lucky last, David Spence.
Oh, thank you, Cass, and nice to see you, everyone. David Spence. I'm sort of involved in 5 different startups at the moment, where I chair them all, and I sort of believe in investing in what I chair. They normally start off with helping a founder with an idea and lead to something, hopefully. I've found them so different, all of them. In all the roles where I've started as a mentor, or even in the roles when I used to chair PayPal, which I did for 9 years, we used to have embedded mentoring built into our systems there, where each director would have 2 mentors and change over after every 2 years. Some were friends, some were just needed advice on time management, some really needed sort of to think ahead and were so busy in their day-to-day jobs could never think of their careers or others. Everyone was different. And what I really enjoyed about the process was really finding out what makes it tick for a certain people. When we're all so busy, sometimes it's time management that's the issue, as I said, and that's the help certain people need. Other people need to sort of be aware of the pitfalls. They don't know what's coming around the corner. And we had a very good discussion yesterday with one of my little founders, where the 3 of them hadn't taken any leave for the past sort of 18 months during this pandemic, and what was going to happen post-pandemic when all 3 of them wanted to go and leave at the same time. What happens to the company then? It's little things as well as big things that count here. I'll sort of go back to you, Kaz.
Cool. Yeah. So thanks, David. The question that I wanted to start with, which I thought was interesting, is, and a few of you have touched on it, is kind of what do we mean when we talk about mentoring? To Do we mean kind of a subject matter expert guiding you through a certain task? Do we mean kind of a coach helping you make decisions generally in the context of your whole life and your kind of personal context? Curious on thoughts from the panelists on this. I'll just get people to jump in rather than picking people.
I'm going to go first if that's okay. And my personal view is all of the above. And you need the expert advice like Cheryl was missing. You need the sort of the supportive conversation like Ben referred to. You need to be challenged at times as well as supported. And my own view of mentoring is that it needs to be rich. Somebody said on the chat, 12 people. You know, and I think you should think a bit broad. And then some of those people you need to have, though, quite in-depth relationships with, because a lot of the value just doesn't accrue in one conversation. So that's my little comment on that.
I'll jump in. Yeah. I think being a mentor, you have to have a very good rapport with the person you're trying to mentor. You can't be all things to all people, and your personality types need to gel, because you do have to challenge the founder quite often. They need to trust you implicitly, and they need to be able to confide in you and open the kimono and share everything with you. I also don't think that one person can be a mentor all the way through your journey. You need different people to contribute different things at different stages. But personal relationships and trust is critical.
How do you guys think about, just to kind of build on that, how do you think about like when you meet someone, when you know they should be a mentor, or how have the people who you currently mentor found you guys?
I would say,
go Dror.
Everyone go.
So I find it's there's an element of selfish element of it. If you feel you need something from that person, and you need to be kind of, I think you need to be kind of shameless a little bit about it. As a founder, your job is you start from, a lot of times you start from kind of nothing or from very small or not a lot of network. You don't have network capital, and you need to start, step up and push yourself into those, shamelessly push yourself into people's lives and hope that they will like you and join and want to help you. And so that's kind of how I did it. It wasn't like, I didn't wake up one day and have, influential friends in high places. But but how did I know? I guess it was kind of selfish. There had to be something in it from, like, I wanted something from them, quite frankly. But I thought I've got a charming personality and a great sense of humor, so I give something back. And so that was the exchange.
Okay.
Yeah.
And equity,
I think it's important.
Sometimes equity as well works. Yeah.
It's important that you break out the business advice from the personal career advice, because sometimes there's a bit of an overlap, and sometimes it's more the personal issues that need to be sorted out than the business issues, and other times it's the business issues. But it's important to sort of have that clarity and that trust, especially around when it's personal issues.
Do you think that having you or kind of advise on personal versus business, do you think that's a function of that person's experience, or do you think that it's more to do with
I think, Kaz, it's much to do with the experience of that person and the state that they're in, and it changes. Sometimes it starts off as business advice and it ends up as personal advice.
I think there's a underappreciated element for the mentor as well about it. It's actually asking you to become a better person as part of that relationship as well, because you really are at service to the person that you're mentoring. When I think of mentoring, I think about, you really do need to develop great listening skills and be someone who's just tuned into the person that you're talking to. So you're not just there kind of waiting to give smart anecdotes or talk about how you once did this thing or built this thing. So you're sort of a listener first and foremost. You're bringing high energy and positivity to it. I think that's a key part of it. And then you've got this self-awareness piece to kind of know what's the right thing for you to maybe give some input or feedback on, versus kind of knowing who else you might connect them with. or even just kind of recognizing occasionally that in this particular topic, I'm hearing you and let's maybe figure it out together. And so I think good mentoring looks like a two-way relationship, and there really is a value exchange going on there. And it is a very human connection that you're creating, and therefore, you shouldn't look for a mentor as just let's go find someone because they've been in this industry or they have that subject matter expertise. It's like, if I'm going to work with this person for 3 months, 6 months, who knows how long, are we aligned in values and the way we think? And, is this someone that I want to have connected in my world? So, and you get incredible value out of it as a mentor. So I think it's often I know even myself, I didn't appreciate that part of it until I really started getting more active in mentoring. And that's why this whole paid versus non-paid often becomes a non-issue, because you're not thinking about, oh, this is my time. It's like, is this someone that I like seeing their journey and growth with? And we're partners in this.
I think that's such a helpful topic actually for us to double click on, like the idea of especially people who are earlier in their careers or don't have an established mentor network. I think feeling confident to ask people who seem busy and important for their time is really difficult. And so I think it might be helpful for people on the call for us to hear a bit about, from the mentor perspective, like what's in it for you guys when you do this? How do you kind of think about why it's worth your time? So that way people who are trying to reach out to people like you could feel confident saying like, oh, I'm not just cold emailing someone who's going to be pissed off that I'm asking for their time for free. Maybe a couple of thoughts from the panelists on that.
Sure. I like what Dror said earlier, that he's quite selfish in his approach to mentors. I think it all starts with personal contact and a respect for the person that you're with on both sides. So when I'm approached to be a mentor, it's usually by somebody I've done a little bit of work with. We've had some get together and some interaction about them personally or their business or whatever the situation might be. And they're approaching you because they feel you can add value to their journey. I would never take on a mentoring role if I didn't reciprocate that same feeling and didn't feel that I too could have helped them and add value on the other side of the coin. Otherwise, it just is not a mutually beneficial relationship. And I think the reason for being a mentor, certainly from my perspective at this stage, is I've run a number of successful businesses over my career. I've been very fortunate. I've learned a lot. I've made some bad mistakes on the way, but that's all helped with later success. And I feel it's a great opportunity to give back and live somebody else's dream with them.
Awesome. Other thoughts from the crew? What's in it for you as a mentor?
My thoughts about it is that you want to lead an interesting life, right? So life's a journey. So as a founder, CEO, for me, it was huge focus. It was a period of huge focus. You just need, this is the vehicle, drive this vehicle, land it safely, there was no time to look around. And for me, I'm kind of phasing out of that into my next phase of my career, which is still, in the making. And I'm enjoying discovering there's other people in the world and they're doing other things and they're really super interesting. And sure, and I in some ways mentioned, I think yesterday, it's one big paid forward type endeavor. I'm doing it something for me because it's interesting and I feel I can help, but something, hopefully that can help me down the track some way. So it's definitely has to have a symbiotic type and interest. I guess both kind of paid forward as well, plus interesting and either they're solving a problem that you're passionate about, or we're interested in the space, or you can really help and have material impact. So that's what I think animates at least me.
Super quick from me. Ask me an interesting question. But suck me in. Do you know about this or this? And then that turns into a conversation, and then you get to know each other. So that's my quick icebreaker tip. Ask an interesting question. Sorry, David.
No, Cass, I'm a bit withdrawn. I do it and give up my time in order to stay at the sort of edge of where things are happening and what people are thinking about. And it's a two-way street. I get out of it, I think, as much as the people I'm mentoring, because it does keep me involved. It does really keep me thinking about where other businesses are going and how they might compete, especially the old sort of bureaucracies and the larger enterprises of this country, which are slow these days compared to the startup world. And you can just see whether it's the sort of fintechs of this world or the ag techs of this world, they are going to change things. It might take a little bit longer than everybody thinks, but it'll come, and it'll come quickly when it does. And if you're not there at the edge of technology, I think you're losing a lot as a mentor, and you're probably not a good mentor. So if you're in the game of mentoring, I think it counts both ways. A, you want to get something out of it, and B, those that you're mentoring really want to sort of utilize every bit of what they can out of yourself, whether it's your network or your experience or issues around regulatory compliance, government funding, etc. You know, it's a two-way thing, absolutely.
Awesome, that was super helpful. One of the topics that came to mind between, kind of in prep for this was kind of the difference in seeking mentoring when you're in a job versus when you're a founder. I feel like there's something quite, unique about the context of being a founder that somehow makes it it feels like it's easier to reach out to people and ask for help. I'd be curious, kind of any reflections. Do people agree with that comment?
Cass, I think it's both. It's founders and people in executive positions that mentor. I don't think the founders are different, obviously, and it's probably a little bit broader, and it's probably a little bit more personal when it comes to executive positions. But certainly, I think both require, or depending on your personal skills, but both of you require to be there.
I think in an executive context, and it's often about, get mentored or learn by somebody more advanced in their corporate career or something like that. And there's this sort of senior person, junior person sort of dynamic, and there can be really useful information exchanges there. They've gone where you would like to go and that sort of thing. But I really want to encourage everyone to think much more broadly about mentoring. And you can get great mentoring from somebody who hasn't done the things that you're doing or has different diverse experience. It could be somebody who has less experience than you. I have learned a lot from founders that I was supposed to be helping, and they taught me things, right? So I want everyone to not conceive of this mentoring thing as experienced person, less experienced person. I want them to I'm strongly of this opinion that it's actually what you're after with mentoring is different experience. Now, sometimes that experience is different because people have done things you would like to do in the future, but it could be different in many other ways. That you might be super strong on technology and you want to talk with somebody who's a real people person. That people person doesn't have to be the head of HR of an enormous company. They just need to be a people person who can really enrich your life with their different experience. So I just wanted to throw in that and broaden out the conversation. Is that okay, if that makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense to me a lot. Even though I listed now with 5 people I consider mentors, I don't think I ever defined them as mentors during the time when they were mentoring, so to speak. It was more, it was a genuine interest in, helping each other. And now when I look back on why were they bothering, and some of them spent a lot of time with me, and and then I learned to appreciate that they were, really doing it in genuinely as a pay forward type, not looking for anything other than like genuinely helping me. And I agree, they were not. It wasn't an official. I'm gonna need to have a mentor. This is my mentor. It was more broader than that. I agree with you, Greg.
That's I've just often, and I run programs where we introduce senior mentors to entrepreneurs, and that has it can be awesome, but often some of the best results happen sort of almost by accident, as you've just said, Dror.
I like it. Yeah, serendipity, right? That's what it's all about.
Yeah, there's a depth of empathy element here, and to throw something out a little bit controversial, but I having managed a lot of mentor networks or been involved in them as well, I think it can often be a mismatch for a founder to have a mentor who hasn't had to hustle, scrap, fight for their own paycheck or or hasn't had some part where they haven't, like if you've been on a salary your whole life, there's some part where you're going to find it hard to connect with a founder about some element of the you're fighting with limited resources and with a declining bank balance. And so if you're someone who's always had nice stable jobs and salaries, I'm not saying you can't be a good mentor, but you're going to have to somehow combine a much richer depth of experience with maybe, easing yourself into a mentoring role, and just also recognizing that there'll be some sort of qualitative and quantitative element there where you will find it hard to connect. Because there is that kind of roller coastery ride, and part of it is financial, where you're not sure if it's going to work and the money's running out and it's freaking stressful. And so how can you empathize with that part if you haven't had that as part of your own career? So not saying mentors that have always had a salary are not welcome, but you as a founder, I think, should be thinking whether you want to have that as the only mentor relationship, or at least be complementing that with other people who have had the same grassroots hustle. Did that not being controversial or not? Maybe that's a straight.
I don't think that is controversial, but I wouldn't be black and white about it. Those people also bring in often great skills and experience. But when you're looking for the mentors for you, look for people where there's a feeling of shared experience, where there's some sort of connection. Someone mentioned before values alignment. If you don't share the same values, don't bother. You've got to find those connections. I've got another one that's a bit controversial as well, but I'm going to wait until other people had to respond to Ben.
My response to Ben is that it's kind of whatever it takes for you. It's very personal. So I kind of agree. For me, what you said resonates 100%. But I'm not sure it's the rule. I think I agree with Craig. It's a bit more like, what is it that you need in order to succeed in your current journey right now that really matters? So if this is the type of advice you get from someone who has experience in your field and you pay for them, and then that's great. And if it's about someone to talk to you who's been through the trenches just like you did, that's what you needed. And there was a variety of people that I needed help from and used and got help from. So I think I'm resonating with what you said, Ben, but I'm not sure there's a rule like that.
Yeah, I actually think that's a super interesting piece to kind of go into further, like the idea of, you want a community of mentors, like a network of people that you're drawing advice from. And then I think actually the question is, how do you make sense of differing advice from different people? How do you kind of make sense of, when you get advice from someone which doesn't end up being the right advice? Like, how, I'd love to hear reflections on, the role of the founder in kind of filtering the advice they get from different mentors, and like remembering that people's advice is reflective of what they know and what they believe and what they've experienced, and is not necessarily going to be true. It might be more than but it still might not be right. Curious kind of stories and reflections on that.
Well, my advice is always right, and the other mentors is clearly wrong. If there's ever
yes, obviously,
clash.
Ben, you were the exception. We all know this. Yes.
I think it's super healthy to get conflicting points of view, because that's what you're going to get the whole way through your startup journey. So, I know it can be sometimes like, I spoke to founder, mentor X, and they said I should be doing this, and they were saying, and it's like, well, you've got to be able to discern between the two. And probably got to unpack maybe the core principle of what was happening behind both sets of advice, and knowing in a lot of cases that one piece of advice is going to be right, one is going to be wrong, and your process of determining that is going to have a cascade effect on so much more than just deciding mentors. It's going to be how you decide on prioritizing customer segments and product roadmaps and all the rest of it. So I think it's super healthy to have mentors giving conflicting opinions and understand how you work through that, and often also learning that maybe they're both right in some element, but they're coming at from different points of view.
And I think at the end of the day, you're quite right, Ben. Mentors give advice. They see things from a perspective, but it's up to the founder to take that information and break it down, analyze it, and take on board what is right for them. It's not a unilateral, do whatever the mentor says. It's a discussion.
I
Yeah,
found
it is a
that the
discussion,
act
Cheryl.
of asking for, it's a bit like therapy, like the act of talking about it is the therapeutic element, the act of asking, and it's almost like many times it wasn't like, hey, Dror, you should do that. It was like by explaining the problem, you gain that to someone who can understand the problem and help you through understanding the problem is the where you kind of get the aha moments.
I totally agree, Dror. I've got it written down here that I think very often a mentor's role is primarily that of therapist and counselor. You're there as a sounding board for them to unpack their own ideas, use you as a sounding board, and find the solution through the discussion.
Which is interesting. You can kind of say that's or maybe the difference between that and an advisor. If you're gonna get semantics, maybe advisor is someone who has that advice, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's certainly my view, which is you might have professional advisors, you've got an accountant, you've got a lawyer, you've got other people like that, and you pay them for advice. And I think that's slightly different than mentoring, or even though a mentor might give advice. But I'm going to be, this is my slightly controversial attempt to be slightly controversial, which is I think mentors are too much giving advice and too little challenging people to think about things in new ways and broaden their conversation rather than advising or telling what to do. And the thing that made me think about that was Cass asked me earlier, you didn't have mentors when you were growing your startup business, Craig. Why was that? And I was sort of thinking about that and thinking actually the people I met who were potential mentors were far too directive with me. They'd say, you should do this, you should do that. And because I knew more about the business than they did, especially in the early parts of those conversations, I'm like, no, I disagree. See ya. Now, that was partly my bad attitude, don't get me wrong, and I was arrogant and all of that. But I think there's a risk around being too directive. And as somebody said on the chat, I'm sorry, I don't remember who, egos are a thing in mentoring, and sometimes successful people with great track records being good, they've earned it, they bring a bit of ego in, but there's a bit of a tendency to say, I know what you should do, and I really think that that's not the best sort of mentoring. Feel free to disagree.
Everyone is being way less controversial than they think. We need like
okay. I'm going to disagree with Craig. I think you should, I think you have a role to give advice as a mentor where you legitimately have previous experience or expertise, and also if you're a mentor just listening all the time, it can feel too much like therapy, at least to me. So I find it's listening, and have like I didn't get into mentoring to be a de facto an unpaid counselor. And so in my case, it's like if you're asking me a question about product management or various industries that I've been involved in, I might still be like my way. I won't be like my way or the highway, but I'll be like, I would strongly recommend in this case that this is something to consider. Maybe still with a twist of let's experiment and find out, but knowing your moments to actually potentially dive in and be hands-on can be important. But I do agree with your general rule. The general rule is like, you're not in the business to just be the smart guy or smart girl giving lots of pearls of wisdom. But where you come across those areas where it's like, yeah, I am the person that's been doing this for 20 plus years, you almost owe it to the person you're mentoring to tell them what you've learned and what advice you give in that situation.
Yeah, and Ben, there's a time and a place to say don't do that, or especially when they're about to make a big mistake, and challenge versus and I think we should be really clear and direct as mentors when we do have a clear knowledge or a strong opinion. Point I was making is often we think that should be the main role of mentors, is to always have a strong opinion or always know the answer. You should do this, you should do this. I think it's the role of the founder or the leader to find out the answer, what they should do.
I'm with Craig here a little bit here, so I disagree with you, Ben, a little bit. Respectfully, for the purpose of having some drama. No, but I like, and I find, so here's the story. So for me, it's really difficult to get advice from someone who tells me, I know what I'm doing, this is what you should do. And it is an ego, like who the hell is this guy? But it's also what Craig says, they don't know the crucial circumstances and the specifics of your situation. They're bringing their specific, insight and knowledge, maybe honed over 25 years in their circumstances. So, so for me, it never worked with anyone when people told me, here is what you should do. And it's not because I couldn't take the advice because of psychological issues. It was the wrong advice. Hands down, it was independently verified as wrong advice. But then I found myself now talking to startup CEOs these days, and I want to say, hey, this is what you should do. I find myself in exactly the position, and it's really hard to give good advice and to give guidance is really in a way that is accepted is very difficult, and it takes, I think, a lot of experience and I think also something to do with parenthood. I think when your kids, they will never listen to anything you say, so you have to find the right way to say it. So you learn something along the way. In what is this thing called, influencing other people. So I think waving the experience flag is risky. And the way you phrase the advice is you have to be kind of conscious and thoughtful about it, because you can come across as abrasive or overruling, which you kind of don't want to do, because that kind of inflate or deflate their confidence. So it is a psychological creature that you're dealing with over there. So.
Yeah, just I'm not sure if it's my internet bugging out or someone else's, but yeah, there's a quote that I have thought about a lot, which I think is in a Teddy Roosevelt biography, and it kind of makes this distinction between asking for information versus asking for advice. And I really like that kind of concept, which is I'm not asking you to tell me what to do in the situation. I'm asking you to tell me what you did in your situation, and then it's for me to make my decision about how it does or does not apply. And actually that, information is the advantage that people with experience have, right? It's here's what happened in my Series B, here are the terms, here's what happened when I sent that email, here's what that guy wanted, which is not necessarily going to be true for you. And so that kind of distinction of just sharing, and it's so hard to get, really detailed information and kind of, Chatham House, it's not so much oh, here's what a term sheet looks like, but here is what that specific investor is like when they're on your board. That's the information that you really need. But it's for you to make your own decisions about what to do with that information and how you should kind of turn it into a decision.
Cass, I've got a real life example, and hopefully they're not on this call. But we debate every time because that founder wants to raise more and more money. And I'm the one saying, that's very well, but every time you're diluting, and we have this sort of debate just about every meeting about the effects of raising money on the founding shareholding, and it's an ongoing debate. And of course, sometimes he listens and sometimes he doesn't, but it's a healthy debate to have, because it's all very easy to go out and you've got a great idea, you just raise money, but at the end of the day, he's got to look after himself as well.
We've only got a kind of minute left, and so the last topic I wanted to touch on before getting any questions from the audience, if there were some, I'd be really curious just to kind of get people to share a bit on the role of feedback in mentoring relationships. I think one thing that I think about a lot is, being able to, I think about the different people that I have coached and consistently getting wrong that I should be giving them information when what I should be doing is getting them to help them understand how they think and their own blind spots and their own kind of ways of being. And so curious, solicited feedback, unsolicited feedback, the role of kind of helping people understand their own styles of thinking and blind spots.
So, feedback, I can think of an example of someone who's basically said, can you give me feedback on my pitch deck? And, that's very specific, it's very goal oriented. It's measurable almost. And I guess what I'm conscious of is how important, learning how to give feedback correctly. Again, it's one of those, it's very hard because I personally showed my pitch deck to a bunch of people as part of, preparing myself to capital raise. And I didn't like the feedback I got, And then I took some of it. So I guess there's also a bit of you have to have a bit of a thick skin, and like it's what I personally believe. If you're a founder and you have to survive and you have to grow, it's a struggle. So you have to have the big thick skin and agree to disagree often and be okay with that. And so I think there's points for arguments. I believe that when how things collide and sparks come out, and that's kind of magic. So that's, I guess, kind of some thoughts I've got when you mentioned the phrase feedback and how it plays into that relationship.
Kaz, I think there should be regular meetings between the two of you as to whether this relationship is working or not. And you should be absolutely feel free to have that discussion, 6 monthly or yearly or whatever, because otherwise it becomes a waste of time for both parties and they don't know how to put it to an end.
I think feedback is really important. And like you said, being a parent helps a lot because you learn to phrase things diplomatically. I'm a very direct ex-South African. There are a couple of other people on this call who are quite direct as well. Sometimes you have to be very considered in the way you provide that feedback, particularly when you're telling a founder that their baby is ugly and that they need to do something about it right at the get-go. Nobody likes to hear that kind of feedback. And it's how you're able to tell them that and stop them from going down a cul-de-sac where they're going to spend lots of money over a long period of time and have to come back to some fundamental point and redefine things later on. It's a skill that I don't think I've mastered yet, but something I've tried to hone over the years. And I think that's the difference between being a good mentor or a bad mentor, is being able to see through that and give that kind of feedback.
Can I just have one super quick point about that? And I don't think it's necessarily good mentor, bad mentor. It's different, two pairs of people who sometimes that feedback bridge will work really smoothly and sometimes it won't. And so it's about finding the right people who connect with each other, as well as the skills about it, if that makes sense. So, there's certain people who you find it easier to give the right feedback to. And we should be, and other people should get mentoring from somebody else because they're a better match. So, yeah, I think it's down to the individuals as well as the methodologies.
I think it's a fundamental understanding on the part of the mentee that the reason they have mentors is to be able to have those open conversations and get that feedback, even when it's not what you'd hoped it might be.
Yeah, I think we're all lacking kind of people that will give us tough feedback in our lives. Like it's something that's so not normalized, and it's hard to ask for it. It's hard to receive it. It's hard to give it.
I've got a family. I've got a great family. I can introduce you to my family. And give you the worst feedback
yes,
you can
correct.
Get. No worries.
Likewise, willing to offer the same services. My 9-year-old can also help with that as well.
But it's actually a sign of a great relationship with a mentor when both of you feel very comfortable with a blunt conversation, and that's when you've got that depth of relationship, which doesn't happen in one coffee meeting. And at a certain point you can say, for heaven's sake, look, and you can really sort of you can flag that out and have a slightly tougher conversation, and I think that's very valuable. Now, maybe not every conversation should be like that, because we did talk earlier about being supportive, and what I want people to be isn't just supportive. I want informed support. So not just cheerleading, everything's wonderful, but an informed support. So when I say you're doing something good, I need to be credible about that. It needs to be meaningful, and I think so. That's where things get really exciting and make a big difference for founders.
Awesome. We are over time because of our excellent fist fight between the panelists. No, not at all. Don't apologize. This has been a really awesome conversation. I hope that people took lots of insights out of it. I certainly enjoyed it and think that it's, I'm certainly the youngest on the crew. And so kind of definitely at the stage where you're kind of doing as much seeking mentors as giving mentoring. And I think it's the number one piece of advice that you hear people talk about is how mentors have changed their life, but it feels almost impenetrably difficult to get mentors at the beginning of your career. Like it's just this thing that people talk about and it's like, people keep talking about it and I don't know how it happens. So I'm really glad we could have this conversation today. And thanks so much to Rachel for bringing us together, who I will now throw back to.
Oh, thanks so much, Cass. And I suppose for me, what a nugget that conversation was. I want it all over again, and in person maybe. And Tim, yes, the popcorn. I think it does take a village to raise a startup. I think that is the quote. And we were so privileged today to hear from some of the leaders of the village. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And I suppose Tech23's role is always to try to connect the village and to find, to be a bit more like the marketplace where people can actually meet the people that they need to jump ahead. So thank you all so much. That was great expertise. We're going to now stop the video recording